We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today is John Cooper. He's a Metro Councilman at large, also a candidate for mayor in the August 1st election, with early voting starting as early as July 12th. Councilman, we've known there was a Tennessean article not long ago that said you've been a thorn in the side of both mayors. You've served under raising questions and opposition to things they've been trying to do. So we know quite a bit about what you're opposed to and what you want to change. What do you want to do on the positive side? What's John Cooper for when you're mayor?
Oh, well, there's so much that needs to happen. And this mission of getting back to basics is in fact the right mission. The next mayor should be cutting so many ribbons, but the next mayor will be judged about whether they kept and retained police officers and great teachers and great principals and supported them. It is not about subsidies any longer for people downtown, because we've done that. That history is over. The next mayor needs to conduct public business in an appropriate and efficient way and get the money that we have to making our government work. Right now, look at the police department. You're 130 officers short. How is that working? What about teacher retention in schools? It's these basic things. The nation has $120 million worth of stormwater needs. How is that being addressed? Sidewalks have not been built for a generation. All of these things need the attention to get done, and we've not really been doing that. So getting back to basics, putting neighborhoods first, getting the investment where it should be is a huge thing.
If you're elected mayor, you will assume a budget. You talked about it earlier that still has the privatization of parking in there. That's about a $40 million impact, $30 million impact in revenue. Right. There's also the potential sale of the downtown energy system. You're stuck with that budget. Yeah. What do you, with the new council, do to make that budget work when you're $40 million out of balance?
It's going to be a whole lot of work. It's going to require a whole lot of adjustments. It's going to require probably some state help in aspects of this. It's going to require
state help, meaning what, money?
Well, the state help in terms of adjusting what we can charge for things. I mean, already, look at the STR bill. We sat on our hands. We never had the appropriate fee increase for STRs. Now it's finally in Airbnb licenses, okay. Right? We're finally doing an adjustment there. Our fines and penalties line has been declining, as in terms of a budget item, has been declining over time. Why is that? We're asleep at the switch. The city is growing, the city is expanding, we have all these cranes. This is the boom time. This is the time to make these changes, but it's going to be roll up your sleeves management for sure.
You mentioned you got into the race primarily. The last thing that got you into the race was the mayor's announcement of his affordable housing plan involving MDHA. It's about $750 million. What's your plan? If his plan is not the good plan, what's the right plan to do? I've seen some stuff you talking about Metro making that a part of all their incentives, but I haven't seen a plan from you specifically about increasing the amount of affordable housing. Well, first
you have to understand that the mayor's plan is really not any change, right? That it was just repurposing the $25 million that was going to affordable housing and committing all of that to MDHA. Now, I have plans for revolving funds, and also you have to speed up the time to market for everybody that is doing affordable housing. If you were to go around the country and ask what has been the most successful single thing in affordable housing, uniformly cities would say it's time to market. It's how quickly and effectively do you work with profits and non-profits on this mission. You have delays at codes now that are a year. I had a meeting with architects yesterday. They went through one horror story after another. Now, if you have an environment that it's taking a year to get a permit, you have an environment that is slowing down all aspects of supply into affordable housing.
You've spoken out about almost all the job incentives and development incentives that have gone through the council. If you're mayor, are those kind of incentive packages off the table now?
No, I mean, I'm very proud of the ones that I voted for. Century Farms, for example, in Southeast, put the incentives where they need to be and have them stimulate the community that wants them out there, and do it with a people-first approach. Don't necessarily subsidize buildings and hope for a trickle down. Go to these employers and say, how many of our people will you be hiring? Not how many people you're bringing in from outside. How many of our people you're hiring? What are you going to be paying for them? And what skills do they need? And then let us get busy in enriching our own workforce skills so our own population has a higher wage.
You spoke out against both the Amazon and Alliance Bernstein proposals, but then you voted for them in the council.
Not quite. I actually spoke for the Amazon incentive. Actually, I did after my amendment to give them to the Music City Center to pay for these incentives because they're using downtown tax money. They are committed to economic development downtown. They built a $34 million parking garage on the 5th and Broadway site. For them to cover the cost of these incentives from their pocket is a reasonable request because otherwise we're using teacher pay to do it. And they have a lot of money in another pocket and we are using teacher pay. Imagine that. So shifting that incentive payment to the right pocket is an important priority for the city going forward.
But it's a difficult pocket to get into because there are state laws and covenants that are done with legal agreements and loans that don't allow you to go take all that tourism money and spend it someplace else.
You cannot take it all, but you can be reimbursed for expenses. There's a payment in lieu of taxes that can be made from the facility, and really we can be up to their own revenues for their own building are not covered by any state preemption. Now you probably do want the space to stay on. We need to invest in the tourism space. Let's be clear. It is our largest industry and it needs to grow. But equally at the same time, it's got a $60 million cash surplus. It's headed to the end of this fiscal year to $180 or $190 million worth of cash. How do you raise taxes on the rest of the county when the other pocket is bulging with cash? How do you continue to subsidize the downtown space when it is doing that well? So if you shift costs such as the incentives from the general fund over to the tourist space, you will free up money for what could be teacher pay. Can the Music City Center pay for teachers? No, but it can reimburse for money, and then that money can end up for teachers.
John Cooper is our guest. He's a Metro Councilman at Large and a candidate for mayor on August 1st. Back to continue our conversation with him after you watch these messages.
Here's a question for you. If you had the flu, would you go to your accountant to get treated? Would you have your mechanic pull your teeth? Of course not. But too many times people are making the huge mistake of hiring the wrong lawyer for their personal injury case. Lawyers that are jack of all trades and masters of none. When you hire Morgan & Morgan, whether it's for workers' compensation or personal injury, you know your lawyer does just that, all day, every single day. Morgan & Morgan, for the people.com.
Enjoy your garden all year long with these great deals on freezers from McCall's.
Right. This Frigidaire is only $229.
Check out this Danby with LED light, only $369.
Hey, this 20 cubic foot LED light Frigidaire is only $549.
Get a 25 cubic foot model, just $649.
Look at this 14 cubic foot LED light Frigidaire for only $469.
Check out these Energy Star rated Frigidaires.
That's DT McCall & Sons, a home of free delivery and great appliance values. Hey!
At Cornerstone Financial Credit Union, you're more than a customer. You're a member owner with access to lower fees and better rates. Looking to improve your home, consolidate debt, or pay for educational expenses? Your best source of cash may be closer than you think. At Cornerstone, we have home equity lines of credit for as low as 4% APR. Turn to us for the mortgage loan that fits your needs. Give us a call or go online to become a member and see how much you can save. Cornerstone Financial Credit Union, focused on you.
Another battle pitting preservation against development.
Developers propose building a mixed-use development in a space with so much history.
Putting a development of condos on that kind of legacy. It's like going to Gettysburg, putting a McDonald's in Gettysburg. Nobody would do that. We started with putting together a coalition. John Cooper was the only major political figure that took an active role.
One of my big roles was letting them know that there was at least one person in City Hall that was going to fight all the way for them.
John would be at all of the meetings, and we had a lot of meetings. John Cooper knew how important that fort was to the African-American community.
This area should be preserved, and it appears this morning developers pulled their plans.
We won Fort NEGLEY by a sustained effort, which was led by John.
John said, this cannot be ignored. I can't be neutral. Of all the candidates that I know from there, John is not the kind of person that will bend and break on you when things get rough.
Stay safe, informed, connected to the Storm 5 weather team.
We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today is John Cooper. He's a Metro Councilman at Large, also a candidate for mayor. Councilman, the council and the mayor are in the middle of what to do about scooters, electric scooters. They've been both a boon for tourism and for people coming to town. They've also been sort of the bane of a lot of people's existences, particularly in the downtown area. The council seems to be sort of going in a direction. The mayor wants to put in a ban for a while they come up with new regulations. It looks like the council doesn't want a ban, but wants to keep a ban in abeyance, maybe to next month in August, if doing more regulation doesn't work. Are we reaching the point where we find out that we just can't regulate scooters?
Well, a couple things. It's very important. One, there has been no effort to regulate scooters. Last night, Councilman O'Connell pointed out there's not ever been a single ticket written for a scooter violation. So there was no effort to regulate in the past.
So you want police to spend their time doing that? We don't have enough police officers now. How are we going to do that to do scooters?
No, you don't. So there is, and what happened last night is there's a kind of failure of mayoral leadership, even as unpopular as scooters are, that his proposal lost decisively. Now, I actually voted for it because we have to do something about scooters. You have to have at least an RFP approach to have the industry regulate itself better. And that failed. There was no leadership, and that failed. So the council then did pass a get the industry to regulate itself, make them hire people to pick them up, have corrals to put them, hours of operation.
And fewer scooters.
Many fewer scooters, many fewer operators who have an incentive to do a good job. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have a short period of time for the industry to see if it can clean up its act. And then on August the 20th, on third reading, there will be a bill to ban them absolutely. Now that's a carrot and a stick approach, which I believe that people can take some comfort that there's going to be action on scooters. The mayor's approach, which was this kind of ban and then an RFP, was decisively defeated by the council, and that's a leadership issue because the scooters are so important to Nashville because, like the cherry trees, they're a little bit of our symbol of are we out of control? Is somebody else running our downtown that we're not really able to run, and are we just given over to the tourist interests as opposed to the city's interests?
If you had to make a wager or a guess, would you imagine we're going to use the stick at the end of the day in August? We're going to wind up banning these?
If I had to make a wager, I guess I would, and in part I'm saying this so that the industry hears it better clean up its act and in a hurry. Right, there's enough support for that if there's any resistance to getting the right thing done and taking responsibility for your riders in Nashville, then they will be banned. Absolutely.
A couple of brief things I want to mention before we end. There's continued talk about Nashville perhaps being the site of a Major League Baseball expansion team. Nobody knows where they'd play because the current stadium we have for AAA is not supposed to be expandable. As mayor, would you support public support for a new baseball stadium in Nashville?
Yes, but it depends on the deal. Mayor Bredesen had an incredible deal for that stadium. I think with creative deal making, there's every opportunity for Nashville, but you have to be extremely shrewd and not just offer a subsidy. Now, in general, in terms of exciting developments for Nashville, I'm very supportive of, for example, a family amusement park. We've needed it. We have to expand what we're doing for families in Nashville, and any proposal that comes up that is a family-oriented destination for tourists, I think, materially expands our footprint in a way that Nashville needs to go.
So you'd like to bring back Opryland?
If I could.
The private sector has not done that.
Well,
if the private sector doesn't want it, why should the city subsidize it?
The city isn't going to subsidize it. The city, however, can make these opportunities available and doable. What people often don't understand is that it's not the check. If you're writing checks, then that's probably a mistake. But you can facilitate development by making planning and codes and infrastructure and access more reasonable. So in the moment, as you're dealing with a very successful real estate community in Nashville, they are doing well, and I'm sure they will think of lots of opportunities to continue doing well. The city needs to help that when it's right, but for us to write checks out of the general fund, you have to be very skeptical of that, because are we good enough at knowing what is the right deal for the public? The right deal for the public. And as the business person, I think this is my opportunity here.
Very briefly, President Trump is talking about the possibility of having these ICE raids that would take people that are not in this, should not be in this country, been found by the courts not to be in this country, to have them picked up, rounded up, and put out of the country. If that happens in Nashville, and Nashville's not on the list of cities, it doesn't appear at this point. If that happens, what's your instruction as mayor to the police chief and with the sheriff? What would you tell them to do about cooperating?
Well, I think it's been very clear. Our priority is our local force enforcing local laws. That is our priority. That's what should happen going forward. Not assisting the federal government in rounding these. We're not disassisting. We're not assisting. We're doing our own stuff. We're doing our own work. We cannot control the federal government operating in our space. We cannot tell them to go away necessarily. They are the federal government. But in terms of our own resources, we have a crime problem here. We have a crime problem here. The murder rate doubled between 2014 and 2018. All those resources that we have at the local level need to be focused on the local level. And that's the mission of the next mayor, is not to be distracted by national policy storms. It's to do a good job for us right here. Now, we have a new jail that's being built, and we are getting on with investment in that regard.
Councilman, thank you so much for coming in.
My moment. Thank you.
Good luck on the campaign trail.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on Inside Politics this week. I'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.